Hello, if you are just joining us right now, we are preparing our workspace for watercolor painting. Today we are testing out the fundamentals of using watercolor in preparation for our Polaroid watercolor paintings. So to start, we have our jar of water, a piece of paper towel, a pan of watercolors open, and our assigned brushes. We have our long handle clear brush, round synthetic bristles. We also have our black handle detail brush, synthetic bristles as well. What we're going to start out with is just our test strip, and I'm going to review it. Some people may have not done watercolor since they were really young, and there's actually a trick to watercolor. So watercolor is water-soluble pigment, which means it's really a fussy way of painting because you have to be very tedious. What I mean by that is it's all about being aware of how much water is on your bristles. So, for example, let's take our round brush, our long handle round brush, and go ahead and dip the tip of your bristles into that water. And we're going to go right ahead and we're going to grab any color, and I'm going to go to the pigment, not to the paper. A trick with watercolor in a pan is to always go water, pigment, palette, then paper. The reason why is because look at how uneven that is on my bristles. When you go from water to pigment to palette, you can then spin your brush and evenly distribute the pigment on your bristles. See how much better that looks? And then you can also even make little puddles in your palette, and then before you apply it to your paper confidently. So I just did a little strip there. Now this is a medium purple that I did. Before I dip it back into my paint, I'm going to instead go into my water, and then I'm going to go to my paper. So I'm going to skip that middle area, and you're going to see it's sometimes a little lighter. If it's too much pigment still, that's why our paper towel is set up like this. I folded it in half so I can blot and go in the water, and I can do a lighter color. And I'm not going back to this area because I already have so much pigment in my bristles absorbed. So if you want to, you can always blot, and I'm spinning and blotting very gently those bristles, going into the water, and I can go even lighter. The more water you have on your bristles, the more transparent and lighter your layers are. The more damp your bristles are and drier your bristles are. By blotting it here, removing that water, you can go to your palette or the pigment. You're going to see that you're going to have a darker line. Now another thing is pressure. Notice how I'm holding, so there are a couple different ways you can hold a paintbrush. I'm holding it like a pencil today, but I notice how I'm not smushing the bristles down. When you smush the bristles down, you get a broader brush stroke. You have less control over it. So I suggest you guys have a little lighter touch here and experiment with some of your thick and thin lines. Notice how I'm lifting it. Another thing you can do, and I'm just doing a little squiggle, notice how it changes. If I have my brush vertical straight up and down, I can do really, really little lines. Then when I tilt it diagonal, I can do thicker lines that have ribbons to them. So you can do a lot of differentiating your brush strokes just with the position of your direction you're holding your paintbrush. And that's with a round brush. Now another thing, watercolor dries very quickly. So you want to be aware of those drying times. Right now, my layers are starting to dry. This one's a little shiny still, so I can see it's still wet. Bleeding colors can be done intentionally or they can be done accidentally. So timing with watercolor is key. If you want to do a background layer and then do another color over top, but you don't want it to blend, time is going to be your best friend. Meaning you have to wait until that first layer dries completely. Then you can do a very nice layer over top and it won't blend. But if I try doing this layer, which actually I think it dried just in those last few seconds, sometimes it does bleed, and you don't want that to happen if you move too fast. On the other hand, you can do that intentionally by doing wet on wet. So what I'm going to do, and you guys get up at any time if you want another test strip today. I'm running out of room on my first one. But I'm cleaning off my brush here, and I'm not smooshing it into the bottom of the glass. Make sure you're just rinsing it gently so you're not destroying those bristles. And I'm blotting it until I see no pigments coming off. Yes, it's dyed. Your bristles will turn gray and brown just because it's dyeing them. But what you can do with a clean bristle round brush is wet your paper first with a clear puddle. Now, puddling is something you usually avoid with watercolor. You don't want that to happen with this type of paper, especially because then it creates holes and it gets too soggy. But look at this, it's kind of shiny right there. It's almost puddling. I kind of blended it out so it's not one big blob of water. Before that dries though, this is called wet on wet. Wet the surface first, go into a color, add that color to one side of it, clean your brush, blot it on your paper towel, go to another color, and then from the other end where that wet area is, you can meet in the middle. And you can create a nice gradient by letting that bleed into each other. You can even manipulate it a little bit with the very, very tip of your bristles. And that creates a beautiful transition from one color to the next. So what we have time for today, since we have a shortened hour, you have a few options. You can practice on these test strips, manipulating maybe different gradients, different lights and darks of colors, like this is watered down, broader stroke versus a delicate stroke that has damp bristles. Here's a gradient, and then different shape brush strokes. Just to gain confidence and control of this medium or material. When you feel confident, tomorrow what we're going to do is we are going to, and you can use as many test strips whenever you want. There are plenty on the side counter. But when you feel confident, you can go in and you can start working on your own Polaroid paintings. But other tips before you get started with that. Notice how notice how in this particular painting, I have clouds in the sky. What color did I use for the clouds in the sky? Gabe?
I'm guessing that you either used white paint or you just painted around where the clouds would have been and you...
Yes. So watercolor uses the white of the paper intentionally, meaning when you add color to the paper, you can't bring it back unless you lift it with paper towel right away. That's a fun technique, but sometimes you just want to dodge that area so that it shows the whitest, brightest area, like highlights of the clouds. So thinking about the white of your paper and protecting it in some spots, it might be helpful, especially in this case. So you can see how I did it in this one too. I left the white of the paper in between those clouds. and I have a little wash of grays and blues kind of building up there. Versus this one, I did a gradient in the background and then let it dry completely, and then I did the clouds over top later. So you can have all sorts of different effects when you're going into your painting. But I will demonstrate that further tomorrow. Today, with the remaining time, let's do a bunch of testing out, playing, experimenting. Tomorrow, I would like for you to have photos saved onto your Chromebook. If you would like to work from photo references, like I showed you yesterday, cropping it on your phone, putting it into your Google Drive or emailing it to yourself, so that tomorrow you can have your Chromebooks and your workspace set up, and we can rock and roll from there. Okay? So, how does that sound? Good? Great. Good job, guys.